Hi folks, welcome back. We are continuing along our Module 1 learning path on navigating the federal software sales market. This is Lesson 1.3, Developing Business Within the Government's Rules and Processes. In our previous lessons, we've taken a rather high-level view of what makes the federal marketplace unique. So in this lesson, we'll start to drill down into how you can develop federal business by examining three things. Number one, how the procurement cycle impacts the government's willingness and ability to communicate. We'll survey the federal software distribution chain to make sure you know where you fit in, and we'll look at some federal methods for buying software. Let's start with a look at how communication changes as you progress through the cycle. Now, communications change as you move through the procurement life cycle, from planning to solicitation and award, and then onwards through post-award. During the planning phase, you should think about informing the government's requirements. So this is where you'll want to let prospects know what makes your software unique and how it will address the government's and ultimately their end users' needs. Now, if you don't know what the need is at this point, it's time to start asking questions. Talk to requirements owners, influencers, even the end users themselves. They're actually a really important and oftentimes overlooked source for this type of information. Once the solicitation releases, that kicks off the quiet period, and this is where communications are going to drop off rather significantly. Our risk-averse acquisition professionals, remember them from Lesson 1.2, they're going to primarily communicate with prospective offerers like yourself through formal channels. Question and answer sessions on active solicitations, for example, and something called an amendment. We'll talk about that soon. Now, keep in mind when you do answer questions that are formal and on the record like this, your answers may end up being shared with everybody, so just be aware of what you share. Don't make anything or don't divulge things that might be considered proprietary. During this quiet period phase, after the solicitation has been released and before it's been awarded, requirements owners and program folks, they might not have very much visibility into what's happening in the acquisition office. I've worked in the acquisition office. I know it can be kind of a black box. So if you ask your program owner or requirements owner, hey, when do you think this contract is going to get awarded? Don't be surprised if they say, I'm not sure. Now, you can still talk to them, the requirements owners and the program folks, about new opportunities, and it's important to continue developing relationships because if the program's buying software now, it's a very good chance they'll buy it again in the future, maybe not the type that you're selling now, but some other type that you might want to sell. So keep active, keep talking to the program folks, but just know that your communications are going to drop off a good bit in this period. Now, after the award is made, communication is going to depend on whether you won or not. Hopefully you did. If you did win, the focus is going to be about delivering the software. If you didn't win, you're going to want to ask for a debriefing from the acquisition professional. This is really important to understand why you didn't win. It may not be a one-to-one phone conversation. You may get a written debriefing, but you still want to ask for it because you'd like to know why your software wasn't selected so that you can propose a more responsive bid next time. Now, continue to monitor the contract, especially if it had options or if that license had to be renewed. There's a chance that it could get recompeted, especially if the customer or the end users are dissatisfied with the product. But nevertheless, continue to engage your program and the prospects throughout the delivery phase, even if you didn't win, so that you're aware of when new opportunities may arise. Another way to think about communications in the federal procurement lifecycle is by the degree of openness. Now, it does gradually reduce as an opportunity progresses towards execution, and then you'll see it kick back up after award. In the beginning, your prospects will be holding general discussions. These will be open and informal. There may not be funding for the opportunity yet, and that's a question you might want to ask. Ask your program folks or the contracting professional if there is a procurement request. They'll call this a PR. A procurement request means that funding has been allocated to the need. That's typically a good sign that this is a very viable opportunity to prospect because it has been funded. Prospects will then take the information they get in those general discussions and begin to develop their need as they start to think about the procurement strategy. So the customer, the program folks, the requirements owners, they're thinking about the need, the type of software they want, the features. The acquisition professionals are thinking about, okay, how are we going to buy this? What's the right method of solicitation? They'll do this through holding industry days or open conference calls or pre-proposal conferences. Those things will be oftentimes published on a site that we'll talk about a little bit later. But don't wait. You don't have to wait for this invitation. You should be sharing capability statements and product literature and other marketing information with your prospects at all phases, definitely, and certainly in the strategy development phase. Ask the acquisition professionals some questions about their particular strategy, whether they think this opportunity might get set aside, for instance, or if they envision ordering the software license off a schedule, or maybe they're going to set up a standalone contract. You can even ask them about the evaluation strategy. Is this going to be something that's bought on a low price, technically acceptable basis, or do you think you'll entertain trade-offs for cost and price? These are great questions to ask, and you need to ask them before the solicitation gets released, because I'd mentioned earlier that quiet period. That's when that quiet period initiates. So as the requirements are finally developed, you may see the agency start to solicit ideas and feedback from the market, and they'll typically do this through formal requests for information. They call these RFIs, or sources sought notices. When you respond to these as a vendor, your goal should be to differentiate your product. So talk about the features that are unique to your product, why your software is better. If you're new to an agency, you might want to put a bug in the ear of the requirements owners or the acquisition office that, hey, look, we know you've bought a certain software publisher's license in the past. Our software is very similar. It's even better. So maybe you want to consider a brand name or equal type of solicitation, so that if it's brand name or equal, they can buy, the product that they want, or an equivalent product. So brand name or equal is very important for new competitors. If you're an incumbent and you're working on a recompete, then you probably don't want brand name or equal. You just want brand name. Your software is the best. Buy it by brand name. In either case, the government's going to have to write a justification and dictate why they're choosing those strategies, but it's important that you sort of get in there and make that case for them. Procurement gets executed. That's when discussions become more formal, right? They might have clarifications they'll seek on your particular proposal. These are all going to be very formal and by invitation type communications. And then after the award, again, it goes into performance and the changing environments, and you're delivering at this phase. And so that's basically how acceptable communications flow through the procurement lifecycle. Now, let's talk about the software distribution chain. It's similar in government as it is in the commercial sector, but the reason we're sharing this is if you don't know where you fall in this value chain, you definitely need to find out. At the top of the chain are the software publishers. This is your Microsoft, your Adobe, etc. They're ultimately going to get their product down to the end user through a couple different channels. There's 3 primary channels. There's the original equipment manufacturer. This is the Dells and the Lenovos of the world. They're going to buy licenses directly from the software publishers, preload them onto desktops or laptops, and then sell them to the end user. There are service providers that distribute software, generally with some additional layer of service or value. So you have resellers. Large account resellers are one example. They might sell to like a large enterprise, for instance. If let's say the Department of Commerce wants a new analytics software that Microsoft is producing. Commerce probably has 50,000 machines they want to get the software on. They might go through a large account reseller to get it in there. Value-adding resellers or value-added resellers, they typically deal with smaller agencies or organizations, or like program-specific types of software. For example, if let's say there was a government organization that wanted to conduct a public outreach campaign and they wanted to buy Adobe InDesign, which is a design suite, software suite, but they only needed it for like a small PR shop, they might get a value-added reseller to come in, sell that software with some training, maybe some installation, some ongoing support for a period of time while the staff gets used to using Adobe InDesign. Then you have like a third tier, and I put this sort of one tier lower because you get a little closer to the end user as you go down this chain. And by the way, both the resellers and then these tier 3 entities are service providers, so they sell the software with an additional service. The retailer's additional service is inventory and handling the transaction on behalf of the software publisher. Systems integrators, these are really large organizations like Accenture, for example, where they might bring multiple component systems together for a government agency. What's important to know about systems integrators, Lockheed Martin would be another one, is they often have approved purchasing systems, which means they can buy software licenses on behalf of the government with the government's money. So there's a couple different ways to sell into the government. It doesn't just have to be selling direct to consumers. We are going to talk about that more in Module 2, so you'll want to stay tuned to that. Managed service providers are similar to VARs, except they look for a bit longer relationships. So they might just work with an organization to handle all their software integration needs for like an extended period of time. And then there's the online and cloud environment. This is really an evolving field, and the government's still not quite great at buying cloud. We can't get into it too much because there's a host of different issues here. But this is where the government might go straight to like Microsoft 365, which is I think their cloud-based system, and buy licenses there. So that's basically the distribution chain. The important thing is to know where you are in this ecosystem. What's the company you're selling on behalf of? Who are they exactly? All right, now that we have an understanding of the software distribution value chain and how your communications change as you progress through the procurement cycle, let's think about how we can apply those lessons to navigate a very process-driven purchasing environment. All the complexity of the procurement cycle can really be broken down into 3 simple steps: solicitation, proposing, and award. The number one critical lesson is that your proposal or offer strategy will be informed by the solicitation. Your ability to successfully sell your software depends on submitting an acceptable offer. It is crucial that you understand how the government is going to buy your software in that particular case, and that's defined by the solicitation. There's 2 primary methods of solicitation. There's the request for proposal and the request for quote. An RFP, proposal, is more formal, and there's a longer evaluation process. Proposals are binding offers, so there's a lot longer lead time. There's more technical proposal, more technical writing that goes into these. They'll consume time and resources. Requests for quotes are more informal, typically used for lower dollar buys. There is this strange distinction between the legal effect of quotations and the legal effect of a proposal. You'll want to understand that. And then know that RFQs are typically how agencies will buy things off an existing schedule, be it GSA or something like NASA's SOUP vehicle, for example. They'll use an RFQ to get quotes off of those catalog type systems. Now, both types of solicitation will lead to an award. Once you submit that proposal or quote, the government does its little thing. They evaluate the qualifying submissions they receive, and they make an award. The type of award will vary depending on the method of contract. So you might have a purchase order, which is just like a standalone buy for a single license, or a standalone contract for like a higher volume of licenses. That would typically be done through a definitive contract. A vehicle is a type of contract that allows agencies to make purchases over a period of time at predetermined pricing and with already established terms. Ordering agreements are sort of like vehicles, except they're looser and not binding generally. And then there's micro purchases, which is just like a credit card buy. Now, the method of contract will still have to have a payment type, or is this going to be a fixed price contract, time and materials, or cost? Pretty standard there. Just know that the T&M, time and materials, and cost are not likely to be the method that your customers use. It's mostly going to be fixed price for the software licenses that you're selling. All right, the whole process of soliciting and awarding a contract is known in federal parlance as source selection. Source selection gets more technical and formal as you move from general methods on the left to specific methods on the right. This is because the evaluation criteria and proposal requirements are simpler for general methods and more complex for specific methods. Okay, we'll discuss 4 primary methods here. I'll give you a little bit of technical detail, and then we'll share a use case for software in the next slide. All right, a credit card or micro purchase. These can't exceed $3,500 per transaction, $5,000 if you're in DoD, because they are such a low dollar value that's typically no competition is required, and an award is based on price. And there's really the selection decision is somebody just looks at what's available and makes a decision. It's very consumer oriented. Simplified acquisition procedures, they can't exceed $150,000 or $7 million if it's a specific type of commercial item. And that'd be the commercial test program, and that's a little inside baseball. But just know that simplified acquisition procedures are reserved for small businesses, and they're all about making the award process or the procurement lifecycle less administrative and needing of fewer approvals. A competitive contract can be used for purchases of any size. It may be solicited via an RFQ or an RFP. And consolidated purchase vehicles, those are those catalog type vehicles that I mentioned earlier. Those would be things like the GSA schedule or NASA's SOUP. And they're all about leveraging buying power across government so the government can get the best price. Now, how are these used for software? So a credit card or micro purchase, maybe a user needs to buy Photoshop so they can create a logo like this afternoon. So under $3,500 can just buy it and load it up. Simplified acquisitions are useful to speed up routine acquisitions. So maybe a customer needs to renew Microsoft Office 365 for their team. They go out and do a quick, maybe they award to a value-added reseller to come on and install it and do just maintenance support for a couple weeks after that install. A competitive contract is it's typically done when you're looking at more complex solutions or sales that include some type of value add. So maybe here we'd be looking at like a large account reseller to, disseminate software across a large organization's machines, maybe like $1 million worth of Oracle licenses, for example, and some continuing maintenance support. For consolidated purchasing vehicles, that's typically something that's going to be awarded by one agency, but many agencies may order from that vehicle. So we've mentioned GSA schedules. We've mentioned NASA SOUP. We're going to talk a lot more about these in Module 2 as we start to think about preparing to sell and how to position yourself. Okay, that's it for Lesson 1.3. So you can go ahead and click Next and continue on the path, and we'll see you in the next lesson. Thanks very much.